Welcome to Manna at the Tap, a podcast from Tapestry Ministries. Each episode reflects on a daily Bible reading from the Revised Common Lectionary. I'm Gloria, a fellow traveler on a spiritual journey with the Tapestry community, and we refer to the daily Bible reading as our spiritual manna. It nourishes our souls, fostering spiritual growth as we share insights and interpretations that enrich our spiritual lives. Today is Monday, August the 25th, 2025, in the 11th week after Pentecost during the season of ordinary time. This is a time for us to live an extraordinary disciplined life as we experience spiritual growth. The lectionary reading is from the Old Testament book of Ezekiel, named after the prophet himself. Ezekiel was preparing to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors to become a priest when the Babylonian army invaded Judah. He, along with his family and others, was taken into exile to Babylon, and it was there that God called him to be his spokesperson, a prophet to the community. The lectionary reading is Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 1 to 17. After being in Babylon for 7 years, some of the leaders of Israel approached Ezekiel to seek guidance from God on a matter. This was not the first time some of Israel's leaders had approached Ezekiel seeking guidance from God, but they had previously come to ask God a question. God told Ezekiel he was not interested in being their fortune teller or answering their questions. Instead, God spoke to Ezekiel, instructing him to hold the leaders of Israel accountable and to confront them on behalf of the people regarding their sin and those of their ancestors. God had appeared to their ancestors and revealed himself to them when they were slaves in Egypt. It was not the ancestors who sought and found God. Instead, it was in Egypt that God declared he would deliver them, bringing them out of Egypt and into the promised homeland he had given to their ancestor Jacob. They would be a free people, and God had great blessings planned for them. The new homeland would be a gem of a country. All they needed to do to be free and to free themselves from was to free themselves from the idols that had become addictive to them when they lived in Egypt. God wanted to be their only God. The ancestors rebelled and refused to listen to God, choosing not to abandon the idols of Egypt they were addicted to. God thought about destroying them, but to prevent the surrounding nations from thinking that God couldn't care for his people, God brought them out of Egypt and led them into the desert. And it was in the desert that God gave them the commandments by which they were to pattern their lives. He designated the Sabbath as a covenant between himself and the people, and it was meant to be a time for the people to stop and rest, teaching them that if they obeyed his commandments, they would live in a relationship with him. But the people ignored and rejected his commandments, and their hearts turned to their idols. Despite their sins, God fulfilled his part of the promise by caring for them and showing them mercy in the desert during the 40 years they lived there. Now, God had hoped that the generation born in the desert would not be like their parents, but they were. Despite this, God spared them and led them to the homeland he had promised their ancestor Jacob. It was the consequences of their ignoring and rejecting God's commandments that led to their removal from the promised homeland and exiled to Babylon. I have a quick question for you. Are you aware of the idols in your heart?